Hi friend, my name is Sarah and welcome back to my channel. In today's video, I thought I would share with you all of the books that I read in August and in September. I decided to combine both of these months because I only read 2 books in August, and maybe I'll just call this video my summer reading wrap-up part 2 because a lot of these books are still kind of like my summer romance TBR. But anyways, without further ado, let's go ahead and get started. The first book that is in my book stack is The Housemaid by Frida McFadden. I honestly don't really read a lot of thriller books because I am a scaredy cat, and anything that is just a little bit intense, I usually would try to avoid them as long as I can. However, with this book, because there's so many people who love this book, who rate this book like highly, and because the adaptation is coming out in December, I decided that I kind of want to try to read this and see what the hype is all about and if it even worth the hype. If you don't know what this book is about, this is actually about Millie, who just recently accepted a live-in housemaid job at the Winchesters. The Winchesters live in this really rich and snazzy neighborhood. Nina, the wife, is kind of known as the crazy, uptight lady in the neighborhood, and her husband Andrew is known as this doting father, a loving husband, very handsome around the neighborhood, and they also have a daughter named Cecilia. And as you read throughout the book, you learn that they're not like they seem on the outside, and you read a lot about something super twisty, and a lot of these things are very unexpected for me, and I think mostly it's because I don't really read a lot of thriller books. So if you're someone who don't really read thriller, a lot of the plot twists and especially the ending is probably not predictable. But I'm not sure if you read a lot of thrillers, if you think the same way as I do, but all in all, the experience reading this book was amazing to me. I read this book in one day, which never happened, like rarely happened for me. And that goes to show that this book was actually a pretty great read. This is actually only the first book in the Housemaid series, and because I love this book so much, I decided to get the second and third book, and hopefully I'll be able to read them sometime in the future. Let me know in the comment below if you are planning to read this book before the movie comes out in December. I'm usually, again, not someone who read and watch anything that is super intense or even just a little bit intense, and just because I already read the book, I probably would already know what's gonna happen in the movie, so it might not be as scary to me. The next book that is in my stack is Before I Let Go by Kennedy Ryan. This book is about Yasmin and Josiah, who used to be married for a while, but now they are separated. I believe their divorce is final. They do have a restaurant business together, and they do have 2 kids that they co-parent pretty well. Throughout this book, you kind of learn that there are some events that happen that kind of question their decision to separate, and we also learn the stuff that both of them have gone through and how they kind of deal with this grief and how it still kind of haunts them. I definitely enjoy my reading experience of this book because Yasmin and Josiah are pretty relatable. I don't really relate to their life situation per se. I'm still married, I don't have kids, I don't have a business that I run together with my husband, but just the conversation, the things that they go through, the issues that they are trying to overcome feels like it comes from real people that I probably would have known in my real life. That's why I love this so much. And also I feel like because the characters are mid-30s, they are, you know, full-blown adult, I guess, who have gone through some stuff, I just feel like I relate with the characters so much in this book. There are actually 2 other books that is inside this Skyland series that I cannot wait to read. The 2 main characters in the next 2 books are mentioned throughout this book, and I feel like their stories are gonna be pretty interesting and also relatable, just like this one, so I cannot wait to read the next 2 books in the series. Speaking about a book with an older FMC, I also read Summer Romance by Annabelle Monaghan. This book is about Allie, who is also a mom of 2, recently got divorced, and earlier in the year her mom passed away. So within a span of a few months, Allie has been hit by 2 major life events, and she's kind of in her frumpy, slumpy mom era, I guess. She has been just living in her pajamas or her lounge clothes, and her best friend has been trying to get her out of that slump. Allie is finally convinced, and the one day that she decided to actually put on a real pair of pants, she met a man named Ethan, and their meet cute is actually kind of cute because her dog decided to pee on him, and that kind of started a whole conversation between the two of them. When people are talking about this book, they kind of share this information, but I want you to find that out for yourself because I didn't know that until I read this book. But there is a very interesting quick plot twist in the beginning of the book that is kind of unexpected for me, and that makes this book and story even better for me. But anyways, just like the title of the book, she just wants whatever is going to happen between her and Ethan to be just a summer romance, and that's it, because she thinks that she cannot handle a relationship right at this moment of her life. I definitely want to read more of Annabelle Monaghan's books. I have read one of her other book called Same Time This Summer or Same Time Next Summer, I forgot, but the FMC in that book is pretty similar as well, older and, you know, about to get married and stuff, so it's just more relatable for me at least. So if you guys have read any type of books with this type of vibe where the FMC is older, maybe she have gone through life, let me know in the comment below if you have any other book recommendations just like these ones. Okay, the next book in my book stack that I read in the second part of summer is Every Summer After by Carly Fortune. I decided to pick this up because her newest book, One Golden Summer, was just released this summer, and a lot of people are saying that if you want to read that book, you should read this book first because the main character in that book was definitely talked about a lot in this book. So if you read that book first, you're gonna miss some information that might be helpful about that character. So anyways, I decided to pick this up and read it this summer. This is a book about Persephone or Percy and her entanglement with the Florrick brothers, Sam and Charlie. When I first read this book, it kind of gave me the Summer I Turned Pretty vibe, so I was a little bit disappointed because I don't want to read another book that is related or similar to that book series, because I just actually finished that book series as well this past summer. But thankfully, the story as you read it is completely different than The Summer I Turned Pretty, although the background and setting is pretty similar. But anyways, this is about Percy and Sam's relationship. They were best friends when they see each other in the summer. The Florrick brothers actually live in this place called Barry's Bay, and Percy is from the city, and her parents has a cottage in Barry's Bay next to the Florrick brothers, and she always go there every single summer when she was growing up. Something happened one summer that caused Percy and Sam to lost contact, and I think they haven't talked to each other or seen each other for 10 years, and she was invited to the Florrick's mom funeral because she just recently passed away. But anyways, that is kind of the gist of the book, and a lot of people like this book, but a lot of people also do not like the trope in this book, which is totally understandable. But don't let that trope that people dislike deter you from reading this book, because it's not throughout the whole book. You kind of learn about that trope or that plot in the second half of the book, almost kind of like the ending. So the whole book overall is not a bad read. If you do want to read One Golden Summer, definitely pick this book up before you read that, and hopefully you enjoy it as well as I do. The next book that I have is We Met Like This by Casey West. I have actually never read anything by Casey before, but I know this is not her first book. She usually write a lot of YA romance, but this is her debut adult romance, and I actually got this sent to me by Bookspark, so thank you Booksparks. This book is about Margot, or Maggie, who is a hopeless romantic. She works at this literary agency for years as an assistant, but she's been trying to get promoted to an actual literary agent so she can read more stories and basically sell more romance books. Even though she loves to read romance and she is a hopeless romantic, she is currently still still single. She's been using a lot of the dating apps, and every single time she delete them and re-download the apps, she almost always match with this guy named Oliver over and over again. And after like a few years of actually matching on those apps, they decided to actually meet up, and turns out that they kind of click even though they're polar opposites. I'm just gonna stop right there about the book. I do enjoy this book, and I feel like this book is kind of read like a sitcom that I'm watching. I don't know if that makes sense, but basically we're just kind of following their life day to day. It's almost kind of like a slice of life type of book with romance sprinkled in the story. There's also this one big, in my opinion, plot twist toward the end of the book that I did not expect at all, and that's why I actually do enjoy this book while I'm reading it. If you're a fan of Casey West's YA books, I feel like you're probably gonna love this as well, so I would highly recommend it. The next book that I read this past summer is The Stand-In by Lily Chu. This book I've had for quite a while, and I know that this is technically not a summer book. I think it was set in the spring, but for some reason the cover is just giving me summer vibes, so that's why I decided to pick it up in the summer. This book is actually about Gracie, who we learn in the beginning of the book just got fired from her job. She is obviously stressing out because she needs money to live, but she also needs to support her mom because her mom is currently living in a nursing home, and she's also currently trying to move her mom to a more private and like a better nursing home. When she was walking home one day, there's a mysterious car that pulled up next to her, and from that car come out this couple who look super rich and glamorous, and they are none other than Chinese cinema's golden couple Wei Fang Li and Sam Yao. And Wei Fang Li, out of nowhere, gave her a proposal to be her or pretend to be her for 2 months, and Wei Fang Li will pay Gracie a large sum of money. Obviously, because Gracie is unemployed and she needs money, she said yes. I feel like in the beginning of the book's a little slow. I think the first half is kind of reading as a slice of life again. That's what the vibe that I'm getting. We're just kind of reading about the day-to-day of what happened after Gracie accepted that proposal from Wei Fang Li. I thought I wouldn't like this book as much as I do, but as I read toward the end of the book, there is a big reveal that I feel like I kind of predicted, but I wasn't sure if that is the way the story will go. And there's just a little bit more kind of like deeper, I don't know, story or plot about why Gracie and Wei Fang Li look similar and why they could be mistaken as each other. I'm not gonna give you more details other than that, but I did enjoy this book overall. I also feel like the ending could be stretched out a little bit more. I feel like it's a little bit rushed. I still have a ton of questions about that big reveal, and I wish Lily Chu would elaborate more on that, but I guess she is kind of leaving it up to us, the readers, to create kind of like our own extended ending of this story. I don't know. I'm pretty sure she has other books, and I definitely would try to look for them when I go thrifting or when I decide to go book shopping in the near future. Anyways, the next book that I read was Fake Skating by Lynn Painter. I was lucky enough to receive the advanced copy from Simon & Schuster, and I was able to read this pretty early before the release of this book, which was, I believe, toward the end of September. This is about Alec and Danny, who were best friends when they were growing up. Their moms are best friends and were born and raised in this small town in, I believe, Minnesota. And because Danny's dad is in the military, they move around a lot until, I believe, the senior year of Danny's high school, because their parents decided to get a divorce, and Danny's mom decided to move back into the small town that she's from and move in with Danny's grandpa. And a few years before that happened, Alec and Danny, for some reason, stopped sending postcards to each other. They usually send postcards, I don't know, every month or so to tell each other what's going on in their life, to kind of keep in touch and all of that. So when Danny moved to this small town permanently, they were trying to ease back into their friendship, but both of them were kind of mad at each other because both of them thought that they ghosted each other. I don't know if that makes sense. Like Alec thought that Danny ghosted him, and Danny thought that Alec was ghosting her. It was kind of like, you know, a little bit of a miscommunication there. This was actually a pretty fun read for me. I have read, I think, one of Lynn Painter's adult romance, and also Better Than the Movies, which is another of Lynn Painter's YA romance. And to be honest with you, I prefer her young adult romance book better than the adult ones. I know I probably need to read a lot more of her other books, but this one was a very enjoyable read. I think the characters are pretty mature for their age, and I didn't think that I was too old reading this book, because sometimes with this YA high school romance, I feel like I'm too old while reading this book. But this definitely just kind of brought me back to when I was 17, when I was in high school and trying to make new friends, moving into a new school and all of that. And I just love Lynn Painter's male main character because they're just so nice, so obsessed with the FMC. And this is another one of those MMC when he was just super obsessed with her, and I love that. So the next book that I read is another YA romance, and it was Will Always Have Summer by Jenny Han. This is the third book in the Summer I Turned Pretty series, and I finally can say that I finished or completed reading one book series this year. I've said it in the past before that I wanted to finish reading the book series before the last episode of season 3 was released, but I don't think that happened. I feel like I read this toward the middle of September, and I'm just kind of now catching up on the first season. I'm not gonna spoil you with the synopsis of the third book, especially if you haven't read the first or second book or even watched the show. I said it earlier that Every Summer After by Carly Fortune is pretty similar to this one, where there's this one girl who's kind of in between two brothers, but I feel like this is truly more of a love triangle trope, and this is just the continuation from the second book when Belly is already in college. I was kind of avoiding this book because I don't want the series to end. I'll just say it, the first book is still the best book, I think, because that is when we got introduced to all of the characters, all of the parents and all of that. So it's still pretty enjoyable to me, but the first book is still the best one in my opinion. The next book that I read this past month was The Dead Romantics by Ashley Poston. This is actually my second book of hers that I read this year, and I decided to read this so I can start my spooky, witchy read, I guess, for October. This book is about Florence, who is a writer. She wrote and published a book under her own name, but it flopped. So she decided to ghostwrite for this more famous romance author, and she's been ghostwriting for this author for the past 4 or 5 of her books. And in the beginning of this book, we learn that the book editor for that romance author retired and that she's getting a new book editor. The old book editor was this older woman who actually know about her ghostwriting for this famous romance author. She wasn't sure if this new book editor is gonna know what is the arrangement. But anyways, when she came into the office, she found that this editor is the complete opposite of her old book editor. He's this young guy who's super handsome and super tall, and I feel like she was instantly attracted to him, but obviously she can't because they're gonna be working together. One night, she got a call from her brother telling her that their dad unexpectedly passed away and that obviously she had to go back home to attend his funeral and help her family arrange everything. A couple things that a lot of people don't know about her, because Florence now lives in New York, is that she can actually see and talk to spirits. When she was younger, she used to listen to them and help them basically cross over. And Florence kind of remind me of Jennifer Love Hewitt's character in The Ghost Whisperer. I never really watched that show before, but the clips of the show keeps popping up on my TikTok, so maybe I will watch it when I have time. And the other thing that people don't know is that her family actually owned a funeral home back in her hometown. So as she arrived at her hometown trying to plan this funeral, she sees another spirit, and it's none other than her book editor, the new one, the guy that she's attracted to, which is super weird because he lives in New York and her hometown is nowhere near New York. So there's something weird going on because she can't see him, and they were trying to guess his final business might be related to Florence. And as you read through the book, you will find out what happened. And I feel like I have said this about the 7-year slip, but the story is a little bit predictable. But whatever my prediction was in the beginning of the book, actually I was right when I guessed what's gonna happen at the end. It is still a pretty enjoyable read though. I feel like I like this book better than the 7-year slip. And if you are trying to look for a book to start off kind of like your spooky witchy reading vibe for October, I would definitely pick this up. The next book that I picked up was Aftertaste by Daria Lovell. This is, I think, her debut novel, and I got sent this book by Simon & Schuster. This book I feel like is another witchy, spooky vibe as well. So if you're looking into your October TBR, you definitely want to add this book. This is about Constantine, who has this talent or gift, I guess, where he can taste a spirit's favorite meal. How do I summarize this book? Like, it's a little bit hard to summarize because I don't want to spoil anything. Basically, he uses that gift to help people, which they call the living, reconnected with their dead, which is like the relative or friends who passed away. You kind of learn that throughout the book. This whole thing helping spirits move on didn't really go as he expected. That is when kind of things go a little awry, and that is when this book gets super interesting to me. Like I said, I'm not really someone who would read something that is a little spooky or anything like that. Honestly, I've been avoiding reading this book because if you read the summary of this book, it mentioned ghosts. So I'm like, I don't really want to read this book. I think I also read this within like a day or two because it was super interesting and I want to keep flipping the pages as well. And I feel like I wanted to read this book as fast as I can because I just want to find out what is gonna happen next. Last but not least, I read Summer in the City by Alex Astor. I believe this is one of the other 2 books that I read in August. This was about Elle, who is a screenwriter, and she is having a writer's block. The movie or the script that she's writing is about a couple who live in New York, and she used to live in New York, but she swore off New York ever since years ago. But because she is stuck and she doesn't know what to write, she decided to move into New York temporarily just to get some inspiration. She plans to go back to some of the places that she used to go out to when she used to live in New York, hoping that she will get inspired to continue writing her movie. And one of the reasons why she didn't want to go back to New York is because of this guy. His name is Parker. They had kind of like an intense makeout session a couple years ago, and lo and behold, when she moved into like her temporary living situation, the person who lived next door is Parker. Obviously, at first they kind of not liking each other. She couldn't believe that he was her neighbor and stuff, but after a few kind of like meetups outside their door, they decided to help each other out. He needs someone to kind of be next to him on some of like this publicity outing. Parker is actually a famous billionaire, and in return, Parker will help Elle to go around to these places that she has on her bucket list to help her write more. I think this book is just okay to me. I feel like I've read a lot of romance novels in the past few months, and to be honest, there are other romance books that I like better than this one. However, I do like her writing, and I'm curious on how her writing looks like on one of her fantasy books, so I definitely want to pick up Lightlark probably sooner than later because I do enjoy her writing on this book. Those are all the books that I read between August and September, and I guess I will see you next month, hopefully with my October reading wrap up.